Okay, so a quick documentary review. We did Free Solo last year and that went down a tree, and I think probably the documentary of the moment, although Diego Maradona is clearly up there, is Apollo 11. Once again, the vogue for just archive-based documentaries, i.e. no talking heads, no reconstructions, no interviews or freshly shot footage, only constructing historical moments or historical portraits through the use of existing archive is all the vogue at the moment. But it's an incredibly difficult and skillful thing to do, and to pull it off is no easy task. Apollo 11 is directed by Todd Douglas Miller, produced by CNN Films, as in CNN, the news network, and he wanted to approach the subject a little bit like Asif Kapadia did with Senna, Maradona and the Amy Winehouse doc. He had access to the vaults of NASA and was allowed to use footage that had previously been under lock and key and not seen before. They had to go to ludicrous lengths actually to maintain the footage, restore the footage, protect the footage, and then transfer the footage onto a medium that could then be projected for us. And that involved them having climate-controlled vehicles, having to transport reels from NASA to the sort of studios and the dubbing studios to then edit with it. And they also make great use of the audio recordings of the time, lots and lots of tape, and again they had to sort of brush up and scrub up all of the audio to make some of it audible, some of it inaudible, and yet in its inaudibility, if there's such a word, it sort of adds to the authenticity of the experience. Now, I had a real problem with the idea of going to see First Man, the Ryan Gosling film about the lunar landings, because I rather kind of smart-arsely kept saying, oh, well, we know what happens. And yes, there's, even though we know what happens, there's obviously with First Man the drama of getting there, the personal story, the emotional story. But I don't know why watching a fiction about that didn't really appeal, so I passed on First Man. And this one almost fell foul of the same thing. At first I thought, I'm not entirely sure I want to spend an hour and a half in the cinema watching a film about, something I know what happened, I know how it happened, and I know what got there, and I know a lot of the footage. We've all seen it, even though we're probably unaware of the fact that this emblematic footage of Neil Armstrong walking onto the moon, we all take it for granted now. But this film, to commemorate the 50th anniversary, which it will be this month, of the lunar landings, is quite a remarkable achievement. I think it's an absolute micro gem of documentary cleverness. The first half hour of this film, I think, was one of the most stressful, dramatic, heart-poundingly exciting and gut-wrenching and nerve-shredding experience I've ever watched. It's helped by a remarkable soundtrack by Matt Morton and some really brilliant sound design, but we effectively go through a real-time process of watching the countdown, the preparation, the meticulous preparation, the enormous machinery involved in bringing the launch pad out onto the airstrip, and the construction of the tower, and we're seeing footage of the astronauts that we've never seen before, an extreme close-up and beautiful technicolor, as they're prepping and getting ready to go on. And again, I thought all of this would be, interesting, but I didn't think it would be amazing. But the director manages to infuse this footage with such a sort of present day stress. This felt of the now, and in a weird way you sort of watch this, and whilst there'll be loads of there are loads of people who think that the moon landings didn't happen, and there's all those conspiracy theories, I would recommend anyone who does support those theories to watch this, because if it was a hoax, and I don't believe it was, it's a very elaborate hoax, and the level of detail, the scale of technical manpower, men, women, all throwing their scientific, technical, engineering expertise into this effort. It was quite remarkable. And the film uses a few very gentle devices just to ratchet up the drama, though the drama doesn't really need ratcheting. You've got many natural narrative cliff edge moments. So you have the countdown to launch, you have the countdown to one part of the rocket separating and then firing off. You've got the countdown to, you've got these interesting diagrams that show you how when they were traveling to the moon, they had to do a sort of slingshot action around the Earth, and then once they got to the moon, they had to do a slingshot action where they went round the back side of the moon, the dark side of the moon, to quote Pink Floyd, where they would lose transmission with Earth and then come all the way back round before then landing on the moon. And then you had this remarkable second story. So that's the drama of getting there, and then you've got the remarkable stuff of them on the moon, which is probably the most well seen, most well covered, you know, it's the most familiar footage. But the getting there was brilliantly stressful and tense. But then you also have the last half, so it's a film in 3 parts: getting there, getting back. And getting back was as remarkable as getting there. It's, you know, some of these most precise maneuvers in space of docking, locking the spaceships together, locking the Eagle onto the mothership and then getting back, and then actual footage out of the window as they come back through the Earth's atmosphere and onto land. You know, you got a sense of the public spectacle as well. The director has purloined some of the most wonderful archive footage of crowds prepping to look at this from the sky. The colours, it felt so real. It made 1969 feel like today. And as you were watching the sort of relatively dated sort of all the products, you know, the hats, the clothes, the cans of soft drinks that they were using and drinking, and you felt this sense of nostalgia and a time lost. You're then looking at all this kit and technology that's got them up to space, and you're thinking, we couldn't do that again now, or why haven't we done it again? So, you know, this is a remarkable testimony to human endeavour. So as you watch these 3 men, Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong and Michael Collins, all, you know, heading up to the moon, you're reminded of how infinitesimally small they were and we were. And you are made to rethink about that quote that Neil Armstrong made as he stepped off the Eagle, and you've got that sense of, I'd like to know, does anyone know, was that a line that was pre-written for him to say when he landed? Do you think NASA had decided what he was going to say, or did he think of that? Did he improv that as he stepped off and onto the lunar landscape? Because you got a real sense in this film of precisely what that infamous quote, "one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," what that actually meant. Because, you know, you see their footprints in the sand, and it's almost the ordinariness of seeing boot prints and the plastic undertreads of the boots as Buzz Aldrin started to come down the steps, and he rather comedically says, "I better not shut the door and lock us out." Imagine if you got locked out. And so and then you were reminded of this curious detail that whilst they were, Buzz and Neil, sort of plopping around on the lunar surface, Michael Collins was having to go round the moon once more and come back round to pick them up and take them off again. And you think, God, this was a sort of 7 to 9 day exercise of them heading up to the moon, doing a bit of this and coming back. And on the one hand, it is an extraordinary endeavour, and then on another, these 3 men make it look quite everyday and ordinary. They land, they're normal, they're waving, they get back on the aircraft carrier, there's footage of Nixon receiving them, you hear the call from Nixon to them on the moon. And what I also liked about this film was you got lots more content about what they were doing up there and the experiments they were setting and what it felt like and how beautiful it looked. You hear Neil Armstrong talking about the beauty of it and how it reminded him of the deserts of America. So this is quite a beautiful film, and it's a beautiful testimony to a moment in mankind's history that is really a very symbolic moment. Okay, huge arguments as to should we be going up there, should we be exploring Saturn, aren't there more important things to spend money on down on Earth? Yes, there are. But this happened. And so this documentary profiling this most amazing moment is a beautiful example of how, working with the limited footage available, you can turn something that you feel is very familiar and very well trodden and a very well-known story into vitally new material. So it was invested with a life and a relevance. And a particular shout out has to go to the sound design and sound editing, because although there is not one single even off-camera talking head. I mean, when Asif Kapadia made Amy, Senna and the Maradona documentary, he did do freshly recorded interviews, and he would float the audio over the archive that he was working with. In this film, the director has only used sort of, archival material recorded from the actual expedition, the scientists back at NASA Command Center, all of their instructions, what have you, but also radio and television footage. So it has a sort of granular, grainy authenticity to the audio as much as it does to the pictures. I mean, the pictures are almost so pristine. Some of this is shot on 70mm, remarkably, footage that just hasn't been seen before. And, you've got this very authentic audioscape, which at times is almost, as I said, inaudible and not understandable. And yet that strangely adds to that crackly sense. There's a sort of dichotomy here of remarkable technology, getting them to the moon, and the most unremarkable technology that couldn't even record perfect sound. And so you begin to have this strange tug of, we're watching live footage from space of a man on the moon, versus we can't even press a red button or get a clear audio feed. And so, again, you're reminded of a time where technology was this sort of, they say now that the technology in an iPhone, there's the same amount of technology in one iPhone that got the men on the moon. And when you think about that, and you see these banks and banks, and there were some great shots of the NASA Control Center, tracking shots of just thousands of men. I mean, my God, they must have all got the same white shirts and ties from the same stores. So many cigarettes being smoked. And at the end, when they'd landed and everyone was celebrating, I've never seen so many cigars. I mean, you must have been choking in there. And then you had these banks and banks and banks of these stacker units, which were the, will have been the whirring sounds of computers. All that technology now is just in your iPhone. This film truly takes off in a way that I just wasn't expecting it to. So I was on the edge of my seat and I felt very emotional throughout it. It's a real emotional rocket ride through space.
For more film and family fun, don't forget to click the subscribe button and make sure to click the bell to never miss an update.